Hello, and welcome to the Art of Presence podcast. I'm your host, Christine Pollard. On today's episode, I'm joined by Shruti, and we touch on differentiating our experience from others, conditioning, what you don't know, compassion, and honoring the journey of ourselves and others. I invite you to notice what comes up for you as you listen, and along with perhaps having some curiosity. This is the final episode of Season 1. We'll be back soon with more episodes in Season 2 after a short break. Enjoy the episode and feel welcome to share your thoughts with us on socials, Patreon, or my website. Links are in the show notes. Great. So we just finished the meditation. And what's present for you right now?
So my midline's very present, and I can also feel a bit of a holding in my heart, which in some ways is familiar. So yeah, it's both of these things, and being able to be present with the holding while staying in my midline.
And I'm curious about that holding. What is it holding?
What is it holding? I think the holding, my sense is that it speaks to me of vigilance of some kind.
Vigilance of some kind.
Yeah.
And that you had previously mentioned your midline, you being present with that, and that sounds to me like a resourcing kind of sense. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so with that
I'm just
resource,
gonna make myself a little more comfortable.
yes, please do.
Yeah.
With that resource available, then you also notice this holding of some sort of vigilance.
And it has softened since I inquired into it.
As you've inquired, you've noticed a shift.
There's a considerable shift, to be honest. It just sort of like eased up. There's more space. And I think with the naming of it being vigilance, there was also a layer of differentiation that happened. Or I reminded myself that the vigilance started with my mother, that it belonged to her. So yeah, I think both of those things together shifted something inside of me.
You were differentiating and you were being with, like you were inquiring, you were noticing, you were giving attention to what was showing up.
Yep.
Yeah. Can I ask how you experience differentiating, like what that is like for you? Since you mentioned that you knew it was your mother, like what informs you of that?
Because I have previously inquired into the vigilance, the hypervigilance that I have. And I think one big layer there is my mom's own hypervigilance. And I spent 10 months inside of her with her being vigilant that way. So it is an insight that has emerged fairly recently, but it's been a powerful insight. And just differentiating between her and me has been in this particular context, um, has been very liberating.
Mm.
And like I said, it's new, it's recent, this layer, right? So it's something that I'm still deepening into. So I'm digesting and still integrating this new realization.
Mm. So
Mm.
it sounds like you're familiar with it. Like you've
Yeah,
had
that
some
choice is very
experience with
familiar.
this,
Mm-hmm.
right? To be able to differentiate it.
Mm, right.
And I heard you say the word liberating,
It is.
which I feel when I hear that word like very powerful energy.
Mm. It is, isn't it? Liberation. To be free, right? It
Yeah.
is very liberating.
So I see you being free from what was your mother's experience and also you experiencing some of that while being inside of her while she was pregnant with you.
Being inside of her and, you know, also growing up around her, right? It was a very, I think, if someone were to look at her, they wouldn't know that she was hypervigilant because there was like a sense of steadiness. Not a sense, but she looked very steady, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But which is probably why it took me a while to come here and say, oh, yeah, my mom was hypervigilant.
Yeah.
Because my image of her was always this person who was steady.
Mm. So, what's it like to see her or understand this hypervigilance against this image of her steadiness?
Liberating. Because I was trying to live up to the standards that she set for herself, right? And and that I saw in my eyes, she was very easily able to meet those standards. So, and I kept trying and trying, right? And feeling less than in some ways. Why can't I be like that? So, realizing what was underneath that steadiness and that perfection that she embodied for me, right, is 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 important information. And I'm looking at it in a very different context. And then I can be more compassionate towards myself. And then also look at her as being human and have compassion for her.
Yeah.
you know. Say, oh, you really needed to do all that. You needed to hold everything and appear this way all the time and be perfect and everything that you do. You felt the need to do that, to be seen, to be accepted, or whatever it was that she was trying to find, right? To get some need met. Yeah.
I hear your experience of your
Mm-hmm.
mom,
Mm-hmm.
the um how she came across to you and what it modeled for you and how you interpreted those things for yourself and how you're also able to now see her differently than maybe when you were a child.
Yeah.
Um, and I was really touched by the compassion that you
Mm-hmm.
and understanding that you had for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad that I didn't jump into that place where I was able to be understanding and compassionate. It wasn't just a rationalization. So for me to arrive at that place where I could feel compassion for her, I also needed to, I first needed to feel compassionate towards myself, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because I get what it was probably like for her. Like I have some sense of it because I have craved to achieve that. And my reasons underneath that craving, right, were my unmet needs. So I get that because until then it was just about, oh my god, she was so perfect in every way, and that was not something that I just saw or I admired. It was something that everybody said about her,
Mm-hmm.
you know. She received a lot of admiration for being the way she was. So and I was trying to, one, get that admiration from her, right? I thought if I was like that, then I would receive her love and admiration. And yeah, those were very high standards and was incredibly taxing to be living that way. So I had to be hyper vigilant.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. I hear you noticing that you didn't jump right into the compassion for your mother, that this has been a process to get there.
mhm.
First, having compassion for yourself, um, not just rationalizing things, but really being with different layers
Mhm.
in order to see things the way you've been able to see them now, and in order to um, process and differentiate um,
Yeah.
and what you've realized about yourself, that
Mhm.
there were that in that kind of longing, there was that wasn't the word you used, can't remember the word you used, to kind of be like her, that
Mm-hmm.
you realized there were unmet needs there.
Yes. And I think the starting point was the realization, right? And that blew my mind because I had never seen it that way before.
Mm. It's kind of crazy sometimes how a perspective shift when we can see something differently, how much can change from that.
Yeah. And then suddenly that gave me permission to, whew, I don't have to try that hard, you know? Yeah. Which is why I use the word liberating, right?
Yeah.
Because it was truly liberating. I can still strive for excellence, but I have a choice. It's not an unconscious doing, but it's a conscious choice. And that makes all the difference. Having that choice, right? How much of our life we live driven by these unconscious needs. When a choice point arises, for me, that's victory. Now I can choose,
Mm.
and I can
And
choose to
choosing,
consciously. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you can make choices, like we're always making choices, but what is the driving force behind the choice?
Yes. The driving force behind the choice, and also making it a conscious choice,
Right.
right? Having agency. When it's unconscious, I don't know how much of agency you actually have.
Mm.
Yeah.
So then is it a choice?
Yeah, exactly. Is it a choice, or is it being chosen for you?
Right.
I one of my favorite quotes is by Carl Jung. He says, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was, yeah. Um, it's a very Those are very powerful words.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when I think about fate and how um, some people might want to live that way,
Yeah. Or
maybe
may
not
not know
consciously.
that, yeah, or may not know that there's another way,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't realize that we have points of choice in life, in everyday life. You also don't want to be making choices every step of the way, right?
Yeah.
But we do have choice.
Yeah. No, it's coming up for me is this may be too philosophical, but like, so growing up in Christianity, there
Mm-hmm.
are certain denominations where there's like this uh, free will versus predestination
Mm-hmm.
arguments,
Mm-hmm.
and there are some people that want to leave everything up to, say, fate, you know, giving up complete control and letting what be.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some people that go all the way to the other side, like are almost in control of everything, in control of their life and
Yeah.
manifesting and all this kind of stuff. Um, I've always kind of landed somewhere in between. And so it was always interesting when it was like kind of posed as like you have to choose one way. I'm like,
Mm.
maybe it's both. Maybe it's both
Mm.
in different ways. I don't know. And um like there's some people that I know that um don't so it may not be conscious, but it's like they almost don't want to be conscious. Like they
Mm-hmm.
don't even want to like kind of go there. Or like some
Yeah.
things, again, it's our perception of things, how we understand things. Like a lot of people would agree that codependency is like not a good thing for
Mm-hmm.
relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people that don't see it as a problem and think it's how they want to be. And when confronted with like a different way, it's like, no, this is how I want it to be. So yeah, I'm just
Mm.
like thinking about the choice
Yeah.
and it's just interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of nuance there, right? For people, um, now let me go back to what I was saying earlier with regard to hypervigilance, right? So there was that one layer of differentiation that happened that was liberating. That's just one layer. If I reject or resist the hypervigilance, then that's just going to go into my shadow, right? So I also need to welcome that vigilance. So it doesn't end with me differentiating between me and my mother. That's one layer. So I can leave what belongs to her with her. But so there's that piece of what I've inherited from her. There's that piece of what I picked up being around her. And anything else that resonated with that just continued to stick, right? And before I get to that place where if my intention is to feel more safe and that's where I want to go, then I can't reject the hypervigilance that's there. I have to welcome it, I have to give it space. That is part of the process, to meet that intention of mine, to feel safe,
Right.
right?
And I hear you
And
have an intention there guiding you.
yes, yes, an intention there to guide me. Yes, absolutely. And when you speak about, um, I'm just going to jump over to the topic of codependency in relationships, right? What I often find is that people don't know that there's another way. The opposite of or what lies on the other side of codependency is not independence alone. There's also interdependency. And yeah, I don't think people know that. It's the same thing with, you know, people who leave it all up to fate. In their view of the world, they don't know that something else is possible.
Yeah. In one of my classes, we were talking about doubt versus faith,
Mm-hmm.
and how when you make room like for both,
Mm-hmm.
that a truer faith emerges. That if it's, you know, all just leave everything up for faith,
Mm-hmm.
then at some point there's a space where blind following, right?
Yes.
And that when we're with the doubts, not that you live in that place only, but when you invite that in as well and work with that, that a truer faith emerges.
Yes. And there are plenty of parables that point towards that, right? But people who believe in fate are unable to quite see the message of those parables that tell you that you have choice, you have free will, to whatever extent that might be. So, can you hold both of these things together, right? Absence, that's what absence does. You're unable to see, you really just can't see. So, when I see that today, in many contexts, I'm able to bring in that understanding that they're not able to see this, and hold curiosity around that when I can. Um, can I share something
Yeah.
here? So, one of the movement practices that are like the cornerstones of my life is called continuum movement. And the founder of Continuum is Emily Conrad. Yeah. And she, in her book, she writes about how she worked with a lot of people who had paralysis and had lost movement, because that's what paralysis does. And with Continuum, movement came to be in those paralyzed tissues for a lot of people that she worked with. And she had recordings of paralyzed people who were able to find movement, and she was showing them to some orthopedics. Okay. And they weren't able to see the movement while it was clearly happening. They just couldn't see. They couldn't see movement in those videos where people felt that movement and she was able to see that movement, and others were able to see the movement. But these orthopedics in the room weren't able to see because it was so far beyond what their learning, their conditioning taught them. So that's what absence is like. You see it happening in front of you, but I mean, it's happening in front of you, but you can't see it.
Right. Yeah. And then once you see it, you can't unsee it. But it's getting
Yeah,
to that
once you
point of,
see it, you can't unsee it. Yes.
it's so fascinating what our minds are capable of. um, to prevent us from seeing certain things for whatever reason, right? Um, that just can make it impossible to see things at times. And I mean, we all have our blind spots. Some are more willing to seek those out than others. Um, but yeah, it's always interesting when there's people that are like very sure of themselves, that they're like very um, self-aware
Mm-hmm.
and almost like brag about it. And my experience so far, um, so I can't speak for everyone, but my experience of people that tend to brag about their self-awareness,
Mm-hmm.
I often see a lot of things that they don't see.
Oh, yeah,
So yeah, it's interesting,
absolutely.
which has helped me to be like uh curious about my own self. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody can see everything. We're all seeing just part of a of the picture, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and absence is a form of protection as well, right?
Right.
It's it's it stems from some kind of numbness, right? And you get to that place of numbness when the overwhelm is beyond your threshold, then your internal, your body intelligence takes over. It's like you don't have to feel it this intensely. Let me numb it down for you. And thank God that exists.
Yeah.
Whew, we all need that, right? So, absence is a manifestation of that. If I was seeing everything and if I was feeling everything, it would be too much,
Yeah.
right?
Our bodies are so fascinating.
Yeah.
Like I even think about a simple thing like smell, like
Hmm.
something can smell really strongly or really uh badly, like something unpleasant. And after a while you just can't smell it anymore.
Yeah,
Like thank goodness that exists.
exactly.
um but yeah, how incredibly intelligent and wise our bodies are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So wise, so intelligent. We're designed so beautifully.
Yeah. And it has so much to offer us
Hmm.
that, again, a lot of us don't see. But when you're willing to um, experiment or, willing to open up a little bit, um, it's just really cool what
Yeah,
can happen.
yeah. Right. That's why um, Thomas Hubel talks about this all the time, right? That the inherent nature of trauma is that it wants to resolve itself, right? So when something happens again and again and again, it's also repetitive. I mean, trauma is also repetitive in nature, right? It's it is repetitive because it wants to resolve itself. So it's like, hey, tapping first thing, look at me, and then maybe a little harder, a little harder. right?
Mhm.
And then that wakes you up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is why trauma is repetitive.
Right. Yeah. Trauma wants to heal itself. Our bodies want to heal themselves and know how
Oh,
when
yeah,
we let
they
it.
do.
All right. It
Oh,
knows
yeah.
how.
Yeah. It
It's,
knows how.
yeah.
And, you know, it has a self healing mechanism. And I also want to bring in the relational aspect to it. If there is a witness co witnessing with you, relational healing is very, very powerful.
Yeah.
So, in that setting where there's someone to co witness, your body finds a way to heal.
Yeah. It's been fascinating. I'm in this training for focalizing, and we have to do practice sessions on each other, like in the
Mm-hmm.
training.
Mm.
And I've noticed just having the other person there, like, of course, we're supposed to be practicing our skills, and um, there's times where I feel like I'm kind of doing it to myself, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, like how incredibly easier it is for me to even do something like that myself with having another person there as a layer of support, holding the space.
Yeah.
So, like, one of the first skills we learn, which is something I do already, but mirroring, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just there, without any of the other skills, allowed me
Mm-hmm.
to go so deep
Mm-hmm.
and have like really powerful sessions because I know how to do this work, but just having that second layer of support, that witness, someone being there with me made such a profound difference in what I was able to do, how deep I was able to connect with myself, and where I was able to take the session. Like, it's just, yes. Agreeing with what you were saying, like, it makes such a
Yeah.
difference. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm also very touched by your experience with vocalizing and what it's done for you, and having that co-witness, right? Yeah. I think there's a part of me that's also celebrating that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Layers of support. I mean, that's been massive for my healing journey.
Yeah. We're biologically wired to have people around us supporting us. We're not designed to do everything by ourselves. I think modern culture, it's all about being independent. But one person can't do everything, no matter who they are, right? It's
No.
not like I'm growing my vegetables and I, I'm not doing everything by myself. I just can't. I am dependent. And that's okay.
Yeah.
There's independence and interdependence, and they can both coexist,
Right.
right?
There was a time when I wanted to do all the homesteading things and be
Mm-hmm.
self-sufficient.
Mm.
right? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of work.
Oh, yeah.
But I was gonna like make myself do it anyway out of self-sufficiency.
Mm.
And after time in community healing, I was like, why am I trying to do everything myself when we can accomplish so much together? It doesn't have to be all me.
Absolutely.
But it took
Yeah.
me a long time to see that.
Mm. Yeah. And I'm
And I
glad
think
that
there's
you're
fear,
seeing it.
you know, relying on coming from someone that was hyper vigilant and hyper independent to then being able to orient to connection and community.
And
Uh,
support.
yeah, and support, right?
Yeah.
Because there
Yeah.
wasn't trust in others, there wasn't safety with others, and um, until I found that.
Yes. So it is a form of protection,
Mhm.
right? Yeah.
And sometimes we need that,
Yeah, we do.
but I realized that wasn't the path for me.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're able to lean into support. Makes life easier.
Yeah. I notice when you say that, there's this like big breath and like expanding of my rib cage and kind of this like, yeah, support. Like,
Mm.
a resourcing. Just that word can be for me.
Mm. That sounds delicious. And I'm orienting to that now in my own body.
What does that look like for you?
Hmm. Orienting to support.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. There's a sense of expansion, space, from contraction to expansion.
Mm. I feel that.
Mm.
It's nice.
It is, yeah, it is. Yeah, we're meant to be that way. Conditioning has taught us otherwise, but we're meant to do that. Independence is also essential, right? But we can, if you're able to move between the two, that to me signifies health.
Right.
If I am stuck to just one of these two and I'm unable to move between the two, then life becomes difficult. If I am able to move, then life becomes easy. Ease, that is my mantra in life. I want ease. Yeah.
I was just working with that today in a session,
Mm-hmm.
and so interesting how many things my own conditioning and whatnot that blocks that ease.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a time where if I had to take a bite of food, I would do this instead of doing this. I feel like, that's how I lived my life. I would eat like this instead of eating like this. This is so much harder to do.
I'm just noticing how um, I just love having conversations with you.
Oh, likewise.
I love where it goes.
Uh-huh.
And I wish we had more time because I could uh, very easily continue. And I'm sure other wonderful things and wisdom would come up. Um,
Yeah.
but since we don't have as much time today, um, I'm just kind of sitting with all that we've talked about already. And I was curious kind of um, where you're at now, or what you're taking with you, or what is staying with you.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. What am I taking back with me? There are a few things. One is I really value the intimacy that we share, right? And this was an intimate conversation. So I cherish that. So I'm carrying this experience back with me. And I think somewhere this is also in this conversation, we spoke about absence, we spoke about choice, we spoke about um, several such things, right? And in some ways, it's coaxing me to introspect and bring in a new degree of understanding, a new degree of compassion when I'm sitting with someone and they have absolutely no clue whatsoever that another way of life is possible, right? And I find myself in that place fairly often, right? And I sit there with them, meeting them where they are, right? Sometimes with closed ones, the absence can be very triggering because it's clearly touching on something for me, right? So I think in some ways, it reminds me to slow down and just bring in that curiosity, to bring in that understanding for where they are in their life, in their journey. It's just a good reminder, you know,
Yeah.
and honoring who they are, where they are, and honoring my own self as well and where I am and who I am. Yeah, I think that's another thing that I'm taking back with me.
I loved how you said honoring the other and
Yeah.
honoring yourself.
Mm.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's so easy to want the other to be like you,
Yes.
you know? So, so to like sort of something to like nudge you to recognize that that is a whole different individual with a whole different set of experiences and conditioning and all of that. And that's their journey, that's where they are. Who am I to say whether that's right or wrong or how they should be or should not be? Or who am I to even try and fix it or change it in any way? But if I can honor them and see them for who they are,
That's beautiful.
yeah.
And like you mentioned when you started the intimacy of this conversation, I'm so grateful also for our ability to have conversations like this. So,
Yeah. Thank you.
yeah. And I receive so many reminders around choice and absence and compassion and honoring others and honoring ourselves. So, thank you. Thank you
You're
for being here with
welcome.
me. Thank you for taking this journey with me.
The pleasure was all mine. Even in this state of, a little bit of like haziness where my words aren't flowing the way I would like it to flow, right? Even in that.
Yeah. And I'm just, holding that, honoring that, and grateful that despite that state that you're in, that you are still willing
Oh, yeah.
to be here.
Yes.
And how human it is that these things happen. And
Oh, absolutely. You have good days, you have hazy days, you have cloudy days.
yeah. And
Rainy
always,
days.
not always, but usually when you don't want it to be that way.
Exactly, right? Maybe it's all
I
the
was like,
pleasure of
today I
just
really need
being.
to not be that way. And here it is.
Exactly. Maybe it's all the pleasure of being, of recording a podcast.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yep. Some sort of pressure or
Yeah.
it seems like a learning
Or vigilance,
opportunity.
right? I'm welcoming the vigilance. I'm welcoming the stuckness. I'm welcoming the cloudiness, the haziness.
We're allowing it to be here and
Yes.
yeah. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure.
A little more about Shruti. Shruti is a practitioner of somatic psychology. Her work is influenced by pre and perinatal psychology, body-mind psychotherapy, family constellation, continuum movement, collective trauma integration process, and other relational body-centered practices. She works with individuals and groups and has a growing interest in collective healing. Shruti's personal healing journey brought her to this work. It taught her that health is present inside us all. Finding resonance with this health is the guiding force in her work. She's inspired by the potential this work holds to deeply transform life at any age and considers it her life's purpose to pass it forward. She lives in San Francisco, California, and grew up in Bangalore, India. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please consider sharing or leaving a review or supporting this project on Patreon. And if you would like to experience a similar container for yourself, I offer a free weekly virtual space called the Sacred Connection Cafe. If you visit my website, you'll find all the information and the link to join. This is all for Season 1. I hope you'll join us for Season 2 when it's available. Thanks for listening and being here with us.